right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle a question that sounds so simple you might have never thought to ask it, but the answer, well, the answer changes how you see pretty much everything about our economy. The question is, where does money actually come from?
So let me ask you, straight up, when you picture new money being made, what do you see? I'm guessing it's something like a giant printing press spitting out crisp new bills, right? Something official run by the government. But what if I told you that's barely even part of the story?
The picture most of us have in our heads is that some central authority, like the Federal Reserve here in the States or the Bank of England, is in charge of the whole show. They create the money and the rest of us just use it. It's a really clean, simple, top-down view. And honestly, for a long, long time, that's more or less what the economics textbooks taught.
And that brings us to the first thing we've got to unpack, the traditional theory. This is the story a lot of us probably heard in school, and it all hinges on one big, powerful idea. It's called the money multiplier, and the theory goes something like this. The central bank starts things off by creating what's called base money or reserves. Then the commercial banks, the ones on our street corners, they take those reserves, they're required to keep just a small piece of it, and then they lend out the rest. That loan then gets deposited in another bank, which does the exact same thing, and on it goes, multiplying that initial chunk of money across the whole economy. Let's just walk through a quick example. Say the central bank creates $100. Bank A gets it, keeps $10, and loans out $90. That $90 gets deposited in Bank B, which then keeps $9 and loans out $81. You see the pattern, right? This process just keeps repeating, turning that initial $100 into hundreds and hundreds of dollars of actual money circulating in the economy. It's a pretty neat theory. And hey, if this sounds familiar, you're not going crazy. It is still a cornerstone of Econ 101 classes. But here's the thing. It's just not how it works. It's a myth. And get this, the central banks themselves have been trying to tell everyone this for years. Okay, so if the textbooks have it wrong, what's really going on? This is where everything we thought we knew gets turned completely upside down. Here it is. This one sentence from a Bank of England report unlocks the entire puzzle. Loans create deposits, not the other way around. Just let that sink in for a second. It means banks don't wait around for people to deposit money so they can lend it out. They don't need a piled cash to get started. We basically had the sequence completely backward. The old story was you deposit your money and then the bank can lend it to someone else. The modern reality is the bank makes a loan to someone, and in the process of making that loan, it creates a brand new deposit. And the scale here is just mind-blowing. In a modern economy, the physical cash, the bills and coins, that's just the tip of a giant iceberg. Over 97% of what we all call money is just the digital numbers in our bank accounts. And all of that, it's created by commercial banks. So how does this magic trick actually work? Well, it's really just basic accounting. When you go get a mortgage for a house, the bank doesn't open a vault and pull out someone else's savings. Nope. It just types the loan amount into your bank account. In that single instant, the loan becomes an asset on the bank's books, and the new deposit in your account, your new money, becomes a liability for them. And poof, just like that, new money exists that did not exist a moment before. Okay, so if commercial banks are the ones out there creating almost all the money, then what in the world does the central bank even do? Does it have any power at all? Oh, absolutely. It's just not the power we thought it was. So first, let's get this straight. Central banks are public bodies. Their goal is economic stability. Commercial banks, on the other hand, are mostly private businesses trying to make a profit by serving you, me, and other companies. The central bank creates that foundational base money, but it's the commercial banks that create the vast, vast majority of broad money that we all use every day. Now, that last point there on the slide about the source of money supply can be a little tricky. You got to be careful with that one. Because while it's true central banks provide the foundational layer of the system, it's absolutely crucial to remember they don't directly control how much money is in the economy. That power really lies with the commercial banks deciding to make loans. So what's the central bank's real superpower? It's all about setting the price of money, not controlling the quantity of it. By deciding the main interest rate, they basically set the cost of borrowing for everyone, everywhere. And that, my friends, is what modern monetary policy is all about. Think of it like a valve. By raising that key interest rate, the central bank makes it more expensive for commercial banks to do business, so they make fewer loans. When they lower the rate, it gets cheaper, and they're more likely to open the floodgates. This control over profitability, that's the ultimate limit on how much money commercial banks can just create out of thin air.
So let's put this new framework to the test with a real-world example, one that has confused just about everybody for the last 2 decades: quantitative easing, or QE. It starts to make a whole lot more sense when you know how money is actually created.
So you've probably heard this one, right? That QE is basically just the central bank printing a ton of money and giving it to big banks for free. But is that really what's happening?
The reality? Nope, not at all. QE is really just an asset swap. The central bank buys something, like a government bond, from, say, a pension fund. The pension fund's commercial bank is just the middleman. Now, what happens on the bank's books? It gets a new reserve asset from the central bank, sure, but it also gets a new perfectly matching liability, which is the deposit it now owes to the pension fund. It's not free money, it's a balanced transaction. Nothing is free.
And that leads us to the second and honestly even bigger myth, one that ties right back into that old textbook story. Does QE work because it floods banks with all these new reserves, which they can then go out and lend, 10 times over?
And again, the answer is a hard no. That's just the money multiplier myth showing up in a different costume. Remember, banks can't actually lend out their reserves. That's not what reserves are for. They use those to settle payments with other banks. The real way QE is supposed to work is by driving up the price of financial assets, like bonds. When that happens, it gets cheaper for book companies to borrow money, which hopefully encourages them to invest and spend in the real economy.
So, why have we spent all this time blowing up the textbook story? Why does this all matter so much? Because, look, if you don't understand who creates the money and how they do it, you can't really understand how our economy works, period. So let's just hammer home the takeaways. Number 1, private commercial banks create almost all of our money every time they approve a loan. Number 2, that money multiplier thing from your textbook, it's myth. Forget about it. And number 3, the central bank's real power is indirect. They control the price of money, the interest rate, not the quantity. And once you really get that, it changes everything. You'll understand the news about rate hikes differently, and you'll see the whole structure of economic power in a brand new light. And that leaves us with one last big, important question to chew on. If our money supply is brought into existence mainly by private, profit-seeking institutions, and every new dollar is created as a new dollar of debt, what does that mean for the stability of our economy? What does it mean for our collective goals, for things like inequality, and for the question of who really holds the power? That is something worth thinking about. Thanks for tuning in.